Hey, Steve, I was wondering if you could tell me what this noise is about.
We'll get to that right after the intro.
Welcome to the RentPrep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the RentPrep for Landlords podcast. And in this special episode, this is the fifth installment of Landlord Balderdash. If you haven't heard the episodes before, basically, Steve and I are playing a little game where I give Steve two stories, and one of them is real and one of them is Landlord Balderdash. And he has to guess which one is which. But Steve, that creepy music that we heard at the beginning of the episode, can you explain what that's about?
Yeah, so those of you who have this game at home, you'll recognize that music immediately. It's a game called Lightning Reaction, and it literally will shock the last person to react to the music stopping. So it's kind of like musical chairs, except you're holding this device that essentially is a torture device that will send an electrical current into your hand and shock you. And it is as unsettling as it sounds. So we bought this game kind of as like, I wonder what this is like. Bring it into the office. We'll play with the office, and it should be something fun. Everyone in the office to date has refused to play that game any longer. It is not fun to lose. So we were thinking that might end up being a really good punishment for the loser who loses Balderdash, right?
Yeah, well, if you guys remember correctly, we are tied 2-2 right now. So Steve has gotten it correct twice, and he's gotten it wrong twice. So depending on who wins this round, so if Steve loses, he has to recruit 3 people to play this game with him, and we're gonna record it, and we'll put it up on the show notes for this episode on our website. So if you want to check it out, we'll do that in advance. And if I lose, I got to find 3 people to play, and we'll record that as well. So I've watched some of the videos online. I've never played it. Steve told me it's pretty awful, so it should be fun.
It's the anxiety of the music. You know, it builds to this sort of crescendo, of anxiety-inducing sound and music, and then it stops. And like I said, if you're the last person to react and touch, and press your button, it will send electricity coursing through your hand, and it is not a very comfortable thing. And this was, unfortunately, the alternative to every other idea we had come up with. We've got a pond in the back office that we were thinking about making the person jump in. I said, it's a runoff pond, kind of gross. Nobody wants to jump in there or whatever. So this was like, after a lot of kicking ideas around, and we're like, why don't we just shock each other? I don't know, why don't the loser have to get shocked? So that's where we're at right now. I can't believe I agreed to this, but yeah, there's a potential I'm going to be shocking myself soon.
I love it, and I hope that Steve picks the wrong story today, so I don't have to be involved in this little game going forward. So why don't we cue the Landlord Balderdash music?
This is Landlord Balderdash, the game where you guess which landlord story is real and which one is Balderdash.
All right, Steve, are you ready for your first story?
I'm ready. We're doing 2, right?
Yep.
All right. Let's do it.
Here's the first story. In one of my rental properties, the tenants stopped paying rent almost right away. I had the locks changed on them, went to the property 2 weeks later to find the place an absolute mess. Poo on most of the walls, holes in all of the walls, a whole toilet missing, bathtub full of cat litter, kitchen covered in dirty plates from 3 months, old KFC in the fridge, the carpet was completely ruined, and cigarette butts everywhere. $16,000 later on my investment property is back on track. I never did manage to recover my stove or toilet from the old tenants, but the insurance covered most of it.
Okay.
All right, you ready for the second story? You letting that soak in?
Yeah, kind of gross choice of words there, but yeah, I'm letting it soak in. The key things I've written off of this story is KFC in the refrigerator, no toilet, and poop on the walls. So far, everything kind of adds up in the story, I feel like. So, let's go to the second one.
All right, here's the second story. My father owned a 6-story apartment complex right by the Chicago Cubs stadium. He had no clue, but the tenants had created a clever side income off the roof of the property. During home games, they rented out chair space on the roof because you could see into the stadium. Apparently, they were making enough money from 2 games to cover the entire month's rent. Not a bad side income considering there are 81 home games, not including the playoffs. At first, my dad was upset when he found out they were doing this, but then he realized how smart it was. He stopped the tenants from renting out the roof space and built legit outfield stadium seating into the flat rooftop and started making more money off of those seats in a season than he did in rent in 1 year.
It's pretty smart. I've been to Chicago Stadium. I'm trying to think of the surrounding area. As I remember it, there was a lot of residential, so it's definitely possible. That's a pretty plausible story. Okay. All right.
The viewers can't see. I'm smiling right now because we actually have this game, this lightning reaction game, sitting on the table in front of us right now. So I'm kind of looking at our fates just sitting there.
Yeah.
Depending on if Steve can call Landlord Balderdash on the correct story. What's it going to be, Steve?
Oh, man. The Chicago one's so believable. A good landlord, I feel like, would recognize that. I don't think there'd be... Maybe he's got some zoning issues. I don't know. I don't know if legally there's anything that the Cubs would be able to say, hey, you can't let people watch from your own place. Man, the other story's so believable that everything gets wrecked in the apartment and, there's a lot of damage done and you got to fix it. Those are stories we hear all the time.
I was impressed by a whole toilet missing. That's revenge right there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, toilet missing I haven't heard a ton of. I've heard it before, but most of the time it's the copper plumbing and those type of things that you can scrap and get money for. The toilet, you're doing it to be a jerk. There's no... really, what are you going to sell a used toilet for? I can't imagine it's very much. All right, so I'm going to guess that the first story is Balderdash. I'm going to guess that the Chicago story is real. Some fortunate landlord decided he's going to make some additional money and did that.
Well, if you're listening in, hopefully you had better judgment than Steve.
Oh, no.
Because the Chicago Cubs story is the fake one.
Oh, no.
That is the Landlord Balderdash, and the true story is about the tenant that created all those problems and stole a toilet. I'm sorry, Steve.
Man, I should have went with my gut on that. Really?
Well, I think the first story was almost kind of like a cliche in a way.
Yeah,
if you think of terrible landlord-tenant stories.
Yeah, that fit the mold of all of them. That's why I thought it might be easy to make up.
Yeah. So if we recall correctly, you have to recruit 3 people. And
Yeah.
I'm going to film you playing the electric shock game. And we're going to add it to the show notes of this episode online. So you can go to our website. You go to Landlord Resources and Blog Podcast section. You'll see the podcast. Steve's not looking too happy right now.
No, because I know that the 3 people I have to recruit are going to be RentPrep employees. All of them will only do it if I swear and promise that I will take the shock because they don't want to get shocked. So I'm taking the shock. There's no doubt about it. You would have at least picked 3 people that you could have potentially avoided the shock.
Yeah.
You said your brother would have come in and done it. I know I'm stuck with
I'll play if you guarantee to take the shock.
Exactly, right? So yeah, well, of course I'm going to guarantee to take the shock. So I'll guarantee to take the shock. We'll see what other RentPrep employees will agree to do this, but you're the only one that hasn't, I think, in the office. We got a couple of screeners that haven't played it before, but I think that, you know what, Eric, I think that you should have to play it and play it for real at least once to see what all the fuss is about.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Be a man, Eric. All right.
Well, the fake story there, the one I've been to the Cubs Stadium as well, and I noticed that when I was there, those seats that were on top of the roof there.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure it's online somewhere. You could probably figure out what they charge per seat, but some of them actually look like they had stadium seating.
That's pretty cool.
And it's just what a cool thing to just have built in where you're making that extra income on your rental property. Pretty bizarre and unusual. I wouldn't recommend that as a rental property strategy.
Yeah.
But you do see this too, where people buy homes, in areas where they think that maybe, Dallas, Texas, for example, the Cowboys built a new stadium. They just leveled like city blocks in Dallas, wherever they built the stadium. And I remember this because Fred Jackson, who was a running back for the Bills, when they played there, he said at about the 60 or the 40-yard line, a few seats up, is where his house was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so
wow.
He was playing on the field. He's like, I literally played football on the streets exactly where the stadium was. And then they just come through with like ridiculous offers to people to buy their homes, usually in like lower development areas, you know, where they can afford to give you $40,000, $50,000, but maybe twice that or something, whatever the home's worth.
Right.
But
Buffalo's a great example of that happening right now, too. We've got housing development projects that are all but vacated and closed, with everyone knows in the area that the guy who's buying them is the guy who owns the Buffalo Bills. And we all see the future, the writing on the walls, what's going to happen there. And so the same thing's going to happen in Buffalo too, where we wipe out an entire, section of city blocks and take out these projects and housing development areas, and it'll eventually become a stadium there too.
Yeah, and I've thought about this before too, as far as like real estate. Like, and I think we might have talked about this before. Like, if you can see trends that are happening ahead of time, obviously that's a big piece of it. But I've also wondered, like, with the advent of like Uber, they're working on a self-driving car. Google, Apple, they're all working on this technology, and it kind of makes me wonder, because I read an article that talked about urban sprawl, and it basically said that like 30 years from now, if like self-driving cars are completely implemented, that you're going to see a lot of urban sprawl where people are okay living an hour away from work because they have a vehicle that drives them to work, and they're doing emails and they're working on stuff on the way to work. And it's a possibility that you might see that kind of affect rental properties too, because maybe the walkability score of a rental property isn't, as substantial as it used to be, or maybe it even matters more because it's kind of almost nostalgic walking to things local in your community.
Yeah, no doubt. And, in the community that I live in, I can say firsthand for sure, home prices have skyrocketed over the past 20 years because I live in an area that would be considered on the border of being somewhat rural. And so in my immediate area, 20 years ago, houses were going very cheap. It was just far enough away from the city. The commute's far. And like you said, I think we're seeing a lot of the results of that urban sprawl now even. And there's been huge increases in property value in areas that were otherwise considered farming before. And now people are building gorgeous homes and, these huge subdivisions. So,
well, you can always, add more to the house, but you can't just add more to the property.
Right.
So I think as we continue to have more and more people populate this planet, the property becomes more beneficial to people.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I feel like on all these Landlord Balderdash episodes, and if you haven't heard the other ones, be sure to go back and check them out. There's always kind of a few little lessons kind of tucked away inside the episodes. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me about the true story in this instance is they talked about the fact that they had the locks changed on them. And one of the things I was wondering is, do you think that they went through the legal process of actually changing the locks out? Or did they kind of do a self-help eviction scenario? Because you could tell these tenants did not take well to this eviction that had happened.
Right. Yeah, that'd be an interesting piece of the story to hear, because you're right. One of the biggest things that landlords can get themselves into trouble with is these self-help evictions and lockouts. And, we saw some horrible cases in San Francisco of landlords just too aggressively trying to get rid of people. It's so counterproductive to what you're doing. You end up breaking the law yourself, and now you're the one in the wrong, and it's an easy thing to want to jump to that because you feel vindicated. You feel they've done everything wrong. It's your property, and why wouldn't you have every right to change the lock them out? They're not paying, but don't do it. It goes against the law. You can't do that to somebody. And yeah, I can totally believe that the tenants did not take that well and decided, we're taking your toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to know what they did with the toilet. That's not something you just like throw in your car or something and take it with you.
Yeah.
But also with the self-help evictions where people, take it upon themselves to just lock somebody out of the apartment or the rental house. Some of the issues I've read that you can come across too is that the tenant can sue you for spoiled food, utilities that they paid for that they were not using because they were locked out. I think also like there might have even saw something about emotional damages that can happen from that, depending on a scenario that could feasibly happen.
Yep.
There's so many different things and then there's also just depending on your state fines that you can pay per day of them being locked out. So if you do find yourself like, it may seem like, wow, this tenant is the worst tenant. They're not even paying rent. And now you're finding that they're doing damage to the apartment. I'm going to go in there and get the locks changed on them. Like, you're going to make things even worse. So
yeah, every time. I agree. And the worst part is, we're aware a lot of these situations because of the national news headlines that it makes. Local news, certainly, but some of the stories that we've covered on old In the News episodes and stuff where it's just so crazy. And when you really dial down and think about it, it's not as crazy as you might think from the landlord's perspective. Like in every case, you can see like, I see how it got to this point, or I see why the landlord might have thought that was okay, or I see what the landlord was trying to achieve here. It's a fine line. And, most landlords will tell you in almost every area that they're in, laws favor tenants. We all know that most of the time they do. And realistically, it's not that they just favor tenants, they favor people's rights to residency, And so sometimes those rights are sweeping, and sometimes they cover things like having a guarantee that you're not going to show up one day and be locked out. Now, if they go through the due process of an eviction, that's a different story. So landlords have definitely got to learn some patience there and follow the steps, do the right thing. It's going to take a little longer, but it's certainly the right way to go. And in the end, you did everything right instead of taking the shortcut and changing the locks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to do something a little bit different to end this episode here. I just wanted to highlight some of the reviews that some of our customers have left us. I shouldn't call them customers. They're just podcast subscribers. Although they could be a customer technically. Sure, they might be doing tenant screening through us. But I just wanted to highlight a review here. Timothy Moser on iTunes, he left us a review. He said, great show. Clear, practical information for landlords. This show meets a serious need in podcasting. Just wanted to say thanks to Timothy Moser for leaving that nice review. And if you want to leave a review for us, you can go to however you listen to our podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Leave us a review. We're going to be reading a few of the reviews on live on our podcast. So thanks for doing that for us. We really appreciate it. So I think a great way actually to really end this episode now, maybe, Steve, is a little bit of music.
Oh, no.
This is your destiny, Steve.
Here's where the electricity comes in at the end when it goes. You'll hear it. Hang on. Right here. That'll be the electricity coursing through my body.
I love it. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Oh,